Nation Watch presents Breaking Down the Issues, a program taking a closer look at the concerns and problems affecting the quality of life of our citizens in their homes, communities, and country. Now here is your host Shurwayne Holder, Member of Parliament, breaking down the issues.
Good evening, and welcome to Breaking Down the Issues. Of course, I'm your host, Shurwayne Holder, Member of Parliament and Chairman of the People's National Congress Reform. Special good night to each and every one of you. We have a loaded program tonight. Sorry to be late. We had some technical difficulties. In case you haven't noticed, we have rebranded the program from being live from Region 2. And we want to now cover some broader issues, wider issues in the sense of the number of issues that we cover. But then again, we want to get down into those issues in depth. And hence the name, Breaking Down the Issues. Tonight, we'll focus on a number of issues. We had a press conference today, the leader of the opposition and a panel of competent party activists and members of parliament would have hosted a press conference. Lots of issues coming out there, so we want to dive deep down into those issues. The leader, the vice president, would have also done a press conference just after that press conference done by the leader of the opposition. So again, we'll want to touch a little on that. We don't want to follow him around too much, but we've got to dispel where lies are being said, being mentioned. And so on this program, we'll want to do some of that. And then we have some other issues that are in the news that are of concern to citizens. And so we want to touch on that. So again, good night to each and every one of you. I see a number of persons, the usual suspects. Rhonda, good night. We don't have much time. We're just about half an hour late. And so we want to get good night, Fareed Mangal. Good night. Good night to you as well. Good night to all the folks in and around Guyana and those in the diaspora. So for those of you who have just joined, again, we have rebranded this program, Breaking Down the Issues, and we want to get deep down into those issues, a wider cross section of issues, and get professionals on the program, persons that are close to the issues, so that we can have a discussion, getting all the facts out, really trashing out what exactly is happening in the country today. And we'll cover a lot tonight on what would have occurred on the leader of the opposition press conference today. We'll touch a little on the vice president's 1 hour or 2 hour of tiresome bashing of the opposition, and we'll touch on some other issues. So tonight I have a special guest to bring in, but before I bring in that guest, I just want to flip on a few issues in region number 2, because we don't want to just cast away region 2. We want to keep those issues rolling from region 2, but at the same time, as I said, get down into some deeper discussion surrounding the leader of the opposition and the APNU AFC as well. So getting straight into the issues tonight, I just want to ask the operator to pull up the first slide with region number 2. We'll touch on a few issues in region 2 very quickly, very briefly, because we're short on time, and then we'll get to the meat of the program. So operator, if you can pull up my guest, good night to You? Oh, we aren't ready for the guest yet, but we give you a little sneak peek on our competent, qualified guest. But operator, if you can pull up the slide, yes, that's it. The regional issues. Regional issues, we want to touch on a few issues in Region 2 that I've picked up during the week. And so there we have a map. In case you don't know where Region 2 is located, is the Pomeroon Supernam region. That's where I am. That's where I was born and raised, and not where I went to school though. But we'll get straight into the Region 2 issues. Operator, if you can flip the slide to the next slide, where you have CV Noons. Now, folks, this is CV Noons Primary School. I've been to CV Noons Primary School myself at this very school at the tender age. And you know why I have this slide up? It's because parents, teachers alike would have been contacting me, sending me these photos. It caused me to visit the school just a few days ago, and I was surprised that school was in session and this was the condition of the classrooms and the environment there. Desks packed, just put outside, furniture, other you have materials, building materials, and so on. Construction work was actually going on while school was in session. And I had a chance to speak with some teachers. I had a chance to talk with the contractor. I had a chance to speak with even with students there to understand the issue, what exactly was happening. We had 2 weeks of the Easter vacation, excuse me. And what happened is that somebody that was bright decided, somebody at the region, because it is not the school. I can tell you this, the school administration is not happy with what is going on. So it doesn't appear to me that the school is requested these works, but it came from the government. Rather, it came from the government. And this came after you would have had 2 weeks of Easter vacation. 2 weeks of Easter vacation. Now, speaking with the folks there, I recognize that the works, the scope of work that had to be executed there, the engineer, the region, the government, the RDC would have known or should have known that these works could not have been done within 2 weeks. You had Easter Monday being out, you had Good Friday being out, so it's very short of 2 weeks. The scope of work would have been to do the roof, service the roof. You had to paint several classrooms, a lot of classrooms, paint classrooms. You had to lay tile, and in some of the pictures you can see there, you had to lay tile on the floor. You had to do roofing repairs, serious repairs to roofing. You had a lot of bat feces coming down, a lot of dust from the bat feces, the dried bat feces, etc. So it is not an environment that is conducive to learning. And one would have thought that the Ministry of Education, the Regional Democratic Council, the engineers and all these folks there would understand this issue. But when I spoke with persons there, I came to the conclusion that it was because President Ali is due to come and they want to put on show the new block that they're building at this very school. And so they decided that they're going to do all these other works, and then you would have this big fanfare at the expense of the teachers and students of CV Noons primary school. So operator, if you can pull up the new teaching block, the new block that they would have completed. This is the reason for it, because Ali will be here shortly, should have been already on the 28th, I'm told, 28th of April, to commission this new block. So they make a big fuss out of it. And so they had these other works done. And much to the discomfort of the students of the school and the teachers alike of the school. So I thought I had to put this out there. But operator, if you can pull up back that teaching block, there are a number of issues there, and I don't blame the contractor or the school. Again, the government who has to provide the plan for it, has to provide the scope of work. You mightn't see it in the picture, but the rails are the block itself is a little higher than usual. It's higher than the other blocks in the school. It doesn't seem so in the picture, but I can tell you I visited, and so it is a little high. And so the first complaint was that grades 3 and 4 were placed in this block rather than grades 5 and 6. Grade 3 and 4 are still pretty small frame, pretty inexperienced. So parents are concerned that with the space in the rails, that students might be hanging over there. You know, they should think when they're doing these constructions that one size doesn't fit all. This is a primary school and you have to cater for small children. And so the design of the school has to be different. I'll give you this last one quickly because we're out of time and I want to discuss some more important issues. They wanted to have the parents provide curtains and palm plants and all that. Now I'm a parent. I have children at this school. And I said to them in no uncertain terms that I will not in this oil economy, not now, not in the future. Because in my view, we have enough funds. The government often boasts about what they're doing in education, and not a dollar is coming out of my pocket to have a fanfare for Irfan Ali and this PPP government. No, sir, it will not happen. We'll expand more on this at a subsequent program, but let's move on, operator. Let's move quickly to the other issues. Now, this was another issue on my walkabout in the Sodi area and in the markets, the Sodi market and in other markets. I came across a few farmers who complained bitterly. And you can flip between this and the other picture, operator. It's the same farm. Now, these are farmlands within the Siriki Sands in the Upper Pomeroon area. And there is a bitter complaint now coming from these farmers that the PPP member of parliament is bullying them off of these lands. They've been occupying these lands, farming it for over 5 years. One farmer said to me he went into the Guyana Lands and Surveys to get a lease. It's being approved. He's waiting on the surveying to be done. But that suddenly has halted. And the PPP MP now is bullying these farmers off the land. They now cannot access the land. They have to hide to go and reap their pears and their cassava that is currently ready to be reaped. They cannot clean their farmlands also because of this PPP member, this powerful PPP member of parliament. And so that is a burning issue. In the coming weeks, I will seek to head into the area and to engage other farmers on site to see what exactly is happening. I was told by some of these farmers that the said member of parliament has taken over the lands for herself, her family, her grandchildren now have acres there. And that is what is happening in Siriki Sands. They've coveted these lands based on what the farmers have been saying to me in region number 2. If you're not sure where I'm talking about, it's region number 2 in the Upper Pomeroon area, a place called Siriki Sands. And the farmers are complaining bitterly for the PPP MP having taken away those lands from them. They also mentioned to me that there's a government excavator working there for the last 8 months and is doing work for the said MP. It's not doing the public's work, but it's doing work for the PPP member of parliament, herself, her family, her friends, and her favorites there in the Pomeroon. So I'm moving on. We'll come back to that to that issue. And so I want to get straight into the core issues here. And with that, I want to bring our guest, my guest on tonight's program. On, he's no stranger to this program. He's no stranger to Region 2. He's no stranger to leader of the opposition office. Good night to you, Elson Low, economist and party activist.
Good night, good night. Always good to be on. Happy to have a chat. Lots to talk about tonight as well.
Elson, persons, since you've been coming on this program, at the end of it, I always get that, it's been an interesting discussion. Persons, there's serious issues here, and we usually get in depth. You're an economist, myself being an engineer, that's in our professional capacity. And I think we're always able to really expand these issues in a way that the ordinary persons can clearly understand the issues. And so that is why we have thought to rebrand this program, call it Breaking Down the Issues. I think that is most fitting. I actually put it out there and persons responded saying, look, they think based on how we usually carry the program, breaking down the issues suits what we're trying to do here today. So welcome again to you, my friend, and welcome to all the viewers, all the listeners out there from far and wide in Guyana and across the globe. I see a number of persons tuning in from the US and other places in the diaspora. Elson, I want to get to before we get to the press conference, which you were a part of today. I saw this just a few minutes ago, and I thought that the operator should pull it up. The next slide, where we're seeing we've constantly talked about PPP, friends, family, and cronies, and it is not only now, but in their previous administration prior to 2015, we saw government contracts, and specifically if we can zone into contracts coming from the Ministry of Health. This was a sore point in that period prior to us, prior to the coalition rather, getting office in 2015. And now we're seeing the ugly head, it's showing its ugly head again. And a particular company which is known to all and sundry of being friends of the PPP, and specifically the vice president. This, I believe, is on record in the past as saying, this. I don't know if the fella is the CEO or is the maximum shareholder, the majority rather shareholder of this company. But what I know, he's in charge of the company, and he's friends with the vice president, who made that very clear in the past that they're friends. And so there's no shame in awarding these multi-million-dollar contracts to friends, family, and favorite of the PPP. What's your take on this award? I don't know if you have seen this, but I've just pulled up this little, have the operator pull it up.
Well, I would say two things on this. First of all, we must recall that when Sue was visiting the vice president in his home, he said that Sue is my friend. He gets all the support. The vice president is still to explain to the Guyanese people, as far as I can recall, what exactly all the support means. Yeah, and if you're not his friend, does that mean that you do not get the support? So that is one thing that I think has alarmed Guyanese. But more broadly, what I'm seeing there is that this is emergency medical supplies. What we've seen often is that the procurement rules of the country are flaunted by leveraging these emergency provisions or national security provisions, which we saw recently with the electronic ID card. When they're, just so your viewers are aware, when there are emergency provisions or national security provisions, it means that you have more relaxed procurement regulations so that you can sole source and so on and so forth. And of course, that will probably be at a higher price since you don't have competition in order to source these goods. What I would like to point out to your viewers is that, man, it seems to me we have quite a lot of emergencies in this country and national security issues and whatnot that require sole sourcing. And in particular in the health in healthcare, I find that a lot of emergency circumstances arise where drugs, where medicines need to be purchased in a rush. That to me is raises a red flag about the system there, because we should not be seeing all of these emergency purchases. And if you have to purchase emergency medicines quite frequently, then it sounds like you're not managing the ministry the way that it should be managed. So the government, I think, has a function, first of all, of mismanagement, having to do all these emergency purchases. But the second thing is that emergency purchases allow for the type of corruption that we're talking about. Because if you're sole sourcing, you can very well sole source from someone who is your friend, as an example, and then you can very well get a kickback because you were able to sole source. You were able to get the person might have bid a higher number
Well,
and higher amount.
I was coming to that. I was coming to that point.
Yeah.
Why is it that when they sole source, they always end up with new GPHC, or very frequently end up with new GPHC? Another observation there is that new GPHC Inc. is not the lowest bidder by far. Is not the lowest bidder. There should be an investigation into this award. I think the public procurement commission should be looking at this. The public accounts committee also should be taking a very very close look at this award here.
Absolutely, absolutely. It is worthy of investigation so that we know the truth of the matter. But you mentioned the Public Procurement Commission. Of course, that is a commission that PUP never wants to put in place, and so they drag their feet as much as possible in terms of putting in place that oversight body, which is to oversight procurement and so on. It's a constitutional commission. And it is the PUP, despite being in office and it being a constitutional commission, refused to constitute the Public Procurement Commission. And in fact, we had to go in office and constitute that commission first. And then once after 2020, they again took a couple of years before they constituted the Public Procurement Commission, which is supposed to look at these types of matters. The other thing you mentioned there is the Public Accounts Committee. It was indicated recently the Public Accounts Committee has not been able to meet since the government changed what a quorum means. And a quorum before was just 3 members, but now it has to be 2 members from the government and 1 from the opposition. So if the government doesn't want the Public Accounts Committee to meet to go over these types of things, to see where people Guyanese money is being spent, what they can do is they can just not show up, right? And so we've seen 14 such instances, including, I believe, these last 4 meetings we called off one after the other, as a result of the government not showing up. And so this is the type of method the PUP has to undermine our institutions. They'll avoid, they'll distract, they'll drag their feet. This is the type of thing that we see, which unfortunately is having a negative effect on Guyana's institutions and on accountability. And that, of course, facilitates corruption. So those are some serious concerns that people have.
I listened to a few minutes of Jagdeo, and we'll get to him later in the program. But I listened to him talk about corruption, and talk about fraud, and APNU AFC track record. I got the sense that APNU was in power. If you were not a citizen of Guyana, or you're not familiar with what exactly is happening in Guyana, you would believe that the APNU AFC was in government, and that the PPP has never been embroiled in corruption. They would have never, the country would not have been at its lowest, what do you call it, ebb in
Yeah.
during those periods, while Barra Jagdeo himself was president, you would believe that there were never any failed projects happening. You'd believe that there was never a Skeldon sugar factory wasting 200 million, you know, um, due to corruption and incompetence. You'd believe that there was never any fiber optic cable being done by the son of the former president and being scrapped altogether to the tune of 1 point something billion dollars. You'd believe that there wasn't that disastrous project called Amelia Falls. And so many other projects that would have failed under them, and purely due to corruption and incompetence. But here he comes back and he tries to divert attention to APNO AFC and to our press conference, rather than feed the public with your plans, programs, and policies, and how you intend to increase or improve the cost of living, for example, for all Guyanese. But we'll get there. We'll get to those discussions shortly. And well, I think we're out of time, so we'll have to rapidly move to the press conference. Operator, if we can move on to the next slide, we'll have to come back to new GPHC. I'm certain that this is not the first or the last contract that will be awarded on the emergency circumstances. But before we move to that, from that point, you will recall just a few weeks ago, I would have exposed the dumping of some drugs, dumping of tens of millions of dollars in
Yeah.
drugs, and a lot of it were diabetic supplies. And if you read today's paper, if you read the documents for that emergency drug supply, you would see that a large portion of it is for the very things, insulin and other
Yeah.
diabetic supplies there. Lots and lots of diabetic supplies. So I don't know what has changed, Elson, in terms of the number of diabetic patients and the supplies required for them. I don't know if anything would have changed overnight to cause them to suddenly realize that they're they're out, and they have to get a close family or a close friend to the PPP to supply it, that to supply these medication. And he's not the lowest bidder. By far, he's not the lowest bidder, but he gets that contract. The PPP certainly has to explain. There are lots of things there to explain. We'll have to dig in again, maybe on a subsequent program, and lump it with some other issues of corruption and you know within that area. So let's move on to the leader of the opposition press conference held today. Lots coming out from the press conference today, of which you were a part, Elson. And the first issue that came out there, that you dealt with, was the issue of GCOM and its incompetence, and the lack of integrity that we're seeing now unfolding there. Especially in recent times, we had nominations. They just uh, concluding a few days ago, and we saw what happened there. And basically today, the leader of the opposition um, put it out there that there's a deficit of competence and integrity there, and plain fraud we're seeing at GCOM under Claudette Singh. What is your take on it, Elson?
Well, the first thing that I would say, and this is where I think viewers really need to reflect a bit, is of what we want from the Ghana Elections Commission, and what they're so sworn in their sworn duties is to ensure that there is a reasonable level of public confidence in the elections in Guyana. And so they're supposed to take whatever measures they can take to ensure that we have a free and fair election, but also to help to ensure that there's public confidence in the election. And that, of course, may include all sorts of measures to ensure that we have more secure elections. But I think on a basic level, it is not beyond reason for citizens to want GCOM to act when it comes to allegations of fraudulent signatures, and it's not one signature, two signatures. Though we're looking at what looks like hundreds of fraudulent signatures, potentially hundreds of fraudulent signatures across as many as 5 regions of Guyana. And so, GCOM really, I think, has disappointed a lot of people by saying that they're not going to act on all of these fraudulent signatures, despite the fact that we've seen people file police reports. We've seen people come forward to say that their parents have passed away and that their parents are appearing on this list. We've seen people come forward and say that they've migrated and not been back in Guyana for a couple of years, and yet their names are appearing on these lists. We've seen even people with who are bound, bed bound, who don't leave their homes. I believe there was a man who indicated he was blind, who had made that statement, and so that is, I think, really concerning, and it raises the question of what exactly is going on at GCOM, because we need to see them help to bring confidence in to Guyana's elections by the Guyanese people. If you start off local government elections with hundreds and hundreds of these types of issues, then there's you start off on the wrong foot, and the election will already be called into question.
Elson, Article 162 explicitly states that GCOM can do whatever. In simple terms, they can do whatever is necessary to ensure that the elections are fair and credible. Why do you think that the chairman is not acting or utilizing that provision to ensure that all parties are on a level playing field, and all these little issues, not little issues, but these serious issues of impersonation and electoral fraud, that you can quell that, and you can deal with it in a manner that that restores confidence in GCOM, and in a manner that would have all Guyanese saying, well, we have confidence, and we believe that elections are fair, and we'd accept the results. Why do you think the chairperson consistently, if I can use those words, vote with the PPP, and she votes with the PPP against all these issues whenever they come up, and it flies in the face of this very article and other articles which empowers GCOM to ensure that elections are fair?
Well, as we said here, what we need to see is a more objective GCOM. What we need to see is the chair restoring, I think, some confidence in GCOM, some credibility with GCOM. We don't want it to be that the perception is that GCOM is a tool of the PPP. We don't want it to be that citizens feel that there's no point of voting because GCOM is in the palms of the PPP. We don't want that, and I think that even from the PPP's perspective, they want there to be confidence in elections, because if you win an election and there's not confidence in your win, then you're gonna have yourself a rocky road. So I think it is in the interest of everyone to see GCOM go in the right direction, and I believe that the chairwoman has a sworn duty to do everything in her power to ensure that we have credible elections and to ensure that we deal with these types of issues. It doesn't seem to me to be too much to ask that where you have hundreds and hundreds of potentially fraudulent signatures across as many as 5 regions of Guyana, that the Guyana Elections Commission should look into whether or not those candidates should remain as candidates at the very least for the election, even if it is that they believe that the election must be postponed so that these allegations can be properly investigated. You'd think that would be the bare minimum that would be expected given the scale of it. It is not one candidate or 2 candidates. It's a wide range across, as I said, 5 regions. There's only 10 regions in the country, and half of them, as far as I can tell, have had these allegations. So what we need to see is, even the bare minimum would be that the elections need to be postponed, and there needs to be proper investigations as to what is going on. And those candidates where it's indicated that the signatures are not acceptable, they need to be removed from the list. It almost begs the question, Sherwin, that a candidate could do anything, and GCOM would just say, "Oh well, no problem, everything is good, continue with the election." It cannot be that that is the way that GCOM is intended to function.
I agree with you, Elson. Now, the evidence is overwhelming. I was taken back when the chairman said, well, basically, she didn't know, nothing wasn't reported to her. And trying to absolve herself from these issues, which were, by the way, reported to the ROs, rightfully to the ROs responsible for these are constituency elections. And so more importantly, you have to report whatever issues to the ROs responsible for those LDOs, those NDC areas, or the towns, those local government authority areas. And so when she came out saying that, well, the I haven't seen anything, it really struck me that something is definitely wrong with this woman. Um, Herself being a former judge with the kind of experience that she has, and even with electoral matters, you wouldn't think that someone like that would act in such a manner that will cause a nation to question your credibility.
Well, absolutely. I mean, sure. I mean, you have to ask the question whether or not she has internet in her home, because if she is not seeing all of these reports over weeks of people pointing out these things, news articles, of people from abroad, endless Facebook posts, police reports, reports to GCOM officials, all of that she's not having. What it is that she doesn't have internet, and therefore she's not able to get access to any of this information. Or she was in China, she wasn't in Guyana, so she's not aware. I mean, it is manifestly ridiculous that it is that anyone could say really that they have not run across any such allegation. Now maybe she's saying that she didn't receive it from within GCOM. But even so, that raises questions about GCOM still, because if legitimate, serious allegations are raised to GCOM staff, if serious allegations are raised in the press, then GCOM needs to be able to properly address those things, summarize them, and review them at the level of the commission itself. So it is. I think it has caused many Guyanese to be very much alarmed. And I think it is another thing that is funny is that what appears to be so many forged signatures. You have to ask yourself whether the PPP is so comfortable with forging things and with various things that various illegalities that they're willing to do it by the droves, in many different parts of the nation, willing to do it by the droves. That I think gives you a sense of the type of organization that you're dealing with. And of course, at a press conference today, we mentioned, with the issue of the permanent secretary whose phone was seized and was handcuffed and so on and searched. The president saying that, oh, that's normal. Well, I mean, if that is normal for you, that says a lot, right? That is not normal for anybody. Maybe it's normal for the PvP to be handcuffed
Well,
and searched.
the,
And
the leader the leader explained it very well. You see, if you look at the PPP's list in many areas, what the persons that they have are questionable characters, persons who would have gone to jail, persons who are pedophiles, persons who are abusive. These are known people. And even around the vice president himself, when he goes to certain areas, you see them around him very closely in pictures. So I understand. I think we understand fully well when Ali says, well, it's just a normal routine for a chief public servant within
I'm
a,
telling
a, a key ministry to be to be um, to be arrested, to be questioned for hours, to have her
you,
her
visa
her
revoked.
visa revoked, visa revoked.
Normal,
But then
normal.
again, you had several Home Affairs ministers. I don't know if
Yeah.
it's you mentioned it on or Marvin.
I think
but
when we're
several Home Affairs
yeah,
ministers, I want to believe you guys missed Clement Rohi. I
oh,
believe that he had some troubles as well, as I recall it. I'm not 100% certain, but I recall that he had some troubles as well, if I can recall correctly. And then you had Gadraj, the infamous
yeah.
Phantom Squad
Well, you know
minister.
what this has done as well is it's done a lot of damage to Guyana's reputation as a country, because if this is normal, then people will perceive the country as being a place where you have all of these criminal allegations and criminal questions non-stop. And indeed, when you look back at what happened with Sue Gate, and where we've not seen a type of proper investigation of those allegations of corruption and bribery that were made against the vice president. We've been calling for allegations to identify the truth, because there are some very alarming things that were said. But if this is normal, you don't have a problem with these types of issues, as the government has demonstrated, then it is a perception that the international community will now have of Guyana, which is that there's a lot of criminal activity that could be going on.
We gotta come back to GCOM. There's so much there to discuss. What was said at the press conference, but tonight we're a little out of time due to the late start. So I'll I know local government elections are on, and well, the date has been set for June 12th. So we'll discuss, I guess, next week again. We'll dive down into more of these issues. I want to move on to the other part of the press conference, which covered the workers. And operator, if you can move to the slide, no hope for workers under the PPP government. If you can expand, that speaks for itself. But if you can expand, Elson, what really the party is, what the message that came from this heading, what really we were saying to the people, or what the workers have been saying to the party, if you look at it.
Yes,
uh,
absolutely.
in
Well,
average.
our people-centered vision really has touched on many of the things that workers are calling for, whether it is a livable wage, whether it is ensuring that public servants are properly compensated, whether it is ensuring that we don't have the working poor in this country. We've also got policies regarding job seekers, ensuring that job seekers are able to be above the poverty line. That is something that we are going to commit to. And so these are the types of initiatives which will really help the average worker in Ghana to be living quite comfortably. The government has not adopted any of the proposals we put forward, and the government has indicated no intention to adopt these types of proposals. What we're saying is, as we see a country growing, I believe it's at 37% growth this year is the latest estimate, and of course we've had, growth in excess of 20% for many years now, and indeed next year I believe it's going to be 4 or 5% growth again. We're seeing tremendous growth in terms of the GDP. We're seeing our revenues in the Natural Resources Fund. We're seeing much larger national budgets, 40% bigger, then 40% bigger than that one. But we're not seeing money being put towards ensuring that the average Guyanese is able to live better, have a more comfortable life, and weather the cost of living crisis. This is particularly acute when it comes to teachers. And we mentioned this at the press conference, where the government has been putting off giving teachers a proper increase in their salaries, and where we've seen, actually, as we've started to spend our money, the government reduced the share of the budget that is being spent on education. And so there's no surprise that they're not giving teachers any kind of salary increase. They don't value education. They don't think that's an important element of governance. And as a result of that, they've been putting the money towards where they can steal it, which is in infrastructure with their friends, family, and favorites. And teachers have been left behind. We will not, and we've said this before, we'll say it again. We will not leave teachers behind. We will not leave public servants behind. We will not leave the working class behind. We will ensure that everyone in Guyana is living comfortably, because Guyana is a rich country. Do not allow the PPP to put this lie forward that Guyana is poor. This country has more oil per person than every country in the world except for one.
Yep. You're absolutely correct. Libya, for example, we are way past Libya. And for those folks who don't know the history of Libya, that's Gaddafi country, former president. And as I recall it, they had free health, they had free education, they had subsidies. So when you got married, you get a package because they're sort of that Middle Eastern country. They promote marriage and family as every country should, and so they had so much free utilities, and these are pretty much what we in the APNU AFC want to give to our citizens. These are pretty much what we want to give to our citizens. I believe we're now on par with Kuwait, and if you go and Google Kuwait, you or maybe we've overtaken them. I don't know, because oil is moving so quickly. Every few days you have a new discovery. And so the last time I checked, we were on par with Kuwait. But when you look at Kuwait and compare it with Guyana, what those folks are getting over there, as against what we're getting, it's so starkly different. It's so the contrast, Elson, we've had the biggest budget ever. $750 billion, more than $750 billion, and counting, because they just went back to the National Assembly. I believe next week we'll go there to approve billions more, maybe close to 40 billions more. We'll reach somewhere above $800 billion, I think, at the end of next week. Coupled with that, we are seeing uh, the growth rate, fastest growing economy in this hemisphere or even the world. Why is that not translating into uh, better lives, better living standards for the average Guyanese person?
Well, the government has said openly that they've made a deliberate decision that they're going to spend on infrastructure and not going to spend on consumption, things like public servants and education and so on. We see that as kind of totally misunderstanding what is required. Now, what we should be spending on is ensuring, first of all, of course, that we deal with the tremendously high levels of poverty in Guyana, but second of all, that we structure these interventions to deal with other problems. And so that's why we believe that our interventions in terms of things like salary top ups, where you get something on top of your salary every month, will be linked to other initiatives like ensuring that children are attending school, because we have a very high dropout rate in Guyana. Those types of initiatives, when it comes to our policies regarding workers who are seeking employment. We will support them in terms of ensuring that they are above the poverty line. They receive monthly payments to keep them above the poverty line. But of course, in order to receive your monthly payments, you have to show that you're looking for a job. So what we're doing really is we're structuring what it is that they present to deal on the one hand with poverty and inequality, but also to help to incentivize people to move their lives forward, to develop the country, to work, and to grow Guyana's economy. Now, the government, on the other hand, is more interested in just dumping money entirely in infrastructure and stealing as much as they can. And that's why you're seeing huge budgets, but very little benefit to the average Guyanese. The other thing we must keep in mind is that the IMF has indicated that for every dollar spent, we only get 59 cents of return. So that means that all of these huge infrastructure projects that they're going forward with, we're not getting dollar for value. One classic example being the gas ashore project, which we've called for an updated feasibility study on because the price of the pipeline alone tripled. The government has said no, they're not going to do any updated feasibility study, and you could easily save as much as 600 million US by doing that. Now that's the type of thing that we're talking about, where government is running right ahead. It's through an unfortunate mixture of incompetence and corruption. They're pushing projects. Sometimes it's incompetence, sometimes it's corruption, and we're not getting value for money. So big numbers, big growth. The Guyanese economy, by some measures, has tripled in only a few years. But Guyanese, it feels like things are worse than they were before. That is can only really be the case if you have extremely poor governance that just doesn't understand a government that just doesn't understand the way that they should be approached.
Okay, thank you, Elson. Just circling back, I know you touched oil and gas, and intermixed it with livable wage and what we're getting and what we're not getting. I'm circling back to we just had Labor Day, the 1st of May, and MP Coretta mentioned that all the talk about one Guyana, he still had two separate marches, and Ali attending one and not giving permission to the other one to participate at that same venue there at the national park. Only days before it was the time for that march and that rally there to rally the workers. Additionally, well, what I noticed from the press conference, you said that with all the talk that Ali did, he gave no guarantee to the workers. How could that be? How could that be in an oil-rich country? How could that be coming from a government that is saying that there's prosperity on the horizon? How could that be coming from a government that has been spending most of the oil revenue, if not all of the oil revenue? I stand to be corrected. Has been coming in thus far. How is it that you place our most valuable asset, our most valuable resource, human resource, on the back burner, and we go forward with placing monies mostly into big huge projects, infrastructural kind of projects? How is that, and why is that?
Well, one of the things we try to bring up a lot is that the government just doesn't mention poverty and inequality at all. They almost never talk about it, and they hide from those particular topics because they don't have any interest in ensuring that workers in Guyana are compensated fairly. They don't have any interest in wiping out poverty in Guyana, which can be done in short order. They don't have any interest in that. They're focused just on their friends, family favorites, their elites. That's where the bulk of the money is going. Now, we should also recognize that this is the beginning of the oil boom. The government is operating as if they don't think we're gonna make much more oil revenue next year. So they have to push these major infrastructure projects. But really, we need to press pause here and recognize that we have quite a long way to go in terms of oil production. But one of the most pressing issues we've got right now is a very high degree of poverty, as much as 48% of Guyanese, according to recent studies, living in poverty. And given that that is the case, we need to seriously address those issues. It makes no sense to have all the growth in the world and then workers, and we're seeing these Labor Day marches and so on. Workers out here punishing. What is the point of all the growth? What we need to see is a more balanced approach where we deal with poverty and inequality, but we also use that as a mechanism to help to move our economy forward. That is, I think, the best way to approach it, as opposed to this. The government seems to be hoping that growth will provide good paying jobs for Guyanese. And of course, we know that that may not ever be the case because, a lot of foreign folks will come in and will be able to benefit from the high paying jobs if we don't invest in making sure the Guyanese can get those jobs. So they seem to, on the one hand, not have an understanding of what's required, and on the other hand, be distracted by, relentless greed. The thing that I find to be most alarming, man, is how could you be spending a smaller share of your budget on education? Don't you have oil money? You should be spending more, or at least as much on education. Don't you? Don't we
Precisely.
tremendous needs for people to be trained to work in the oil and gas sector? I mean, that seems to me to be obvious, but it is not obvious to the government.
Precisely. Quickly, we're out of time. Sharon's program will be coming in shortly, but I wanted to stick in this question quickly. The High Court ordered the oil companies to provide unlimited insurance. The government seems bent on appealing. Could you explain and make some sense out of this madness? Could you make sense of it?
Well, it is very rare that you will see a government appeal a ruling that is meant
That
to protect
benefits you,
people.
benefits the country,
Well,
right?
benefits the country. That's a new one.
Tremendously.
Someone said that the government is operating like a subsidiary of these oil companies. Um, but the core of the thing for viewers is this: the permits for the various oil production sites are have stipulation that there must be full coverage insurance. That's to say, regular insurance plus a parent company guarantee to ensure that if there's an oil spill, we can properly pay for companies can properly pay for those consequences of an oil spill, the cleanup and so on. Now, the government has been trying to reduce that responsibility, however they can, limiting it and so on, even though we have existing in the permits the right to receive that level of coverage. Now, the court has made a ruling to say that the government should enforce what exists in the permits and give Guyanese the full coverage of insurance that we need to see. Now, these oil spills can be tens of billions of US to clean up, depending on the size of the spill. So the government is really putting Guyanese at risk here. And now that we've got a judgment that has thankfully put Guyanese in a good position where within 30 days, the oil companies are required to have insurance and so on to cover these issues properly. The government is going to appeal that decision so that they can prevent the oil companies from giving the country insurance coverage in case there's an oil spill. It's so
It's
unbelievable.
remarkable.
It is utterly unpatriotic.
Unbelievable,
Yeah,
unbelievable,
unbelievable. Who,
unbelievable.
who would do that?
It,
What
it, it's
government files cases against the interests of its own people?
it that is remarkable, Nelson. It is, but to make it very clear for persons, essentially what the court said in its deliberation is that the the it is already
Yeah,
there that you should have
yeah,
full coverage insurance to
yeah,
cover you over and above
yeah,
any um any um
yeah, yeah,
any expenses above that threshold. I think it's 2 billion or whatever it is, so that anything above that you can have coverage. Now, God help us, this country, if tomorrow the Lisa, some
yeah,
well out there, whichever, whether
yeah,
it's Lisa 1, 2, PR, whichever, well, not PR is not on stream yet, but Lisa 1 and 2 project, if a well should erupt or
yeah,
experience some kind of problem there and you have a massive spill out there,
yeah,
all the money that we would have earned so
yeah.
far might go down to the drain. We might
The
end up
entire
owing first because we've been borrowing left, right, and center
yeah,
from all these institutions across the world. We might also have to pay our neighbors, whether it's
yeah,
Venezuela, Suriname. We might have diplomatic
Trinidad,
crisis. We might have
yeah,
crisis to deal with. The fisher folks, the fishing industry will
yeah,
come to an halt.
yeah,
Thousands of persons out of job.
yeah,
Fish
yeah,
having to be imported at and
yeah,
skyrocketing price and other seafood. We can have hell here in
yeah,
this oil-rich country if we are not properly covered. But the government of the day chooses to has indicated that they will appeal such benefits. Elson, we'll have to draw the curtains on it. There is so much to discuss on that, even that simple rule in there. I will be sure to invite you again on this program with others so that we can really, expand. We don't want to have Sherrod waiting, and it's a different type of program over there. Here we try to break down the issues and be as serious as possible with it. Over there, you can have a different type of thing happening, but it's good. It's good the same way. It was good having you and the viewing audience tonight. You've just gotten a tip of the iceberg here tonight. I want to say a special thanks to all those who have tuned in. Thanks to Elson. Thanks to the operator behind the scenes, and all those who would have made it possible tonight. Good night. God bless. Be sure to tune in again. Same time, same place next week. Well, actually, a little earlier. We'll start at 6:30. We'll try to start at 6:30 so that we can have adequate time to dive down into those issues and break down those issues, as we call it. Thanks again for tuning in to Breaking Down the Issues. I'm your host, Shurwayne. Have a great night.
Nation Watch presents Breaking Down the Issues, a program taking a closer look at the concerns and problems affecting the quality of life of our citizens in their homes.